All right, I'm going to be reading the first part of chapter 6 today for A Girl Who Could Fly. The helicopter flew due north at such a speed that green forests quickly became white with snow. Then the trees disappeared altogether, and there was an endless stretch of wintry tundra that reached in every direction as far as the eye could see. Not that Piper noticed any of it. Slumped over in the luxurious leather seat, Piper's thoughts stayed on the farm, her parents, and how much she'd missed them already. Dr. Hellion, who was seated next to Piper, reached out and gently squeezed Piper's small hand reassuringly. I've never been away from my ma and pa before. My ma always says she can't figure where I've come from. She says that there wasn't even another McLeod like me. Sometimes I thought that was a good thing because I don't want to be just like everyone else. But then I got to thinking and it got me worried because I am a McLeod. And if I'm not a McLeod, then what am I? A person who likes to feel like they belong somewhere? For some people, that path is belonging to more difficult than others. Deep understanding resonated through each of Dr. Hellion's words. I promise you, I will help you find it, though. You reckon? Dr. Hellion smiled and nodded. Relieved, Piper smiled too. There was something about Dr. Hellion that was so calm and assured. Everything made sense to her in a way that it never had to Piper, and she longed for that same knowledge. Maybe she'd learned that at the school as well. Roger that. ETA is 1000. Piper heard the pilot say, and she began looking out the window to catch her first glimpse of her new home. Pressing her face against the glass, she scanned the white horizon. There was no end to the icy terrain, and they'd already been flying over it for quite some time. After a great deal more flying, the helicopter finally began to slow and then descend by a lonely shack, no longer than a tool shed, sitting all by itself in the middle of the frozen, desolate landscape. Is that it? Piper was disappointed and confused by the shabby structure. Yes, we're here. With mounting disenchantment, Piper eyed the feeble hovel that looked as though it might be ripped from its earthy troubles by the hungry wind at the given moment. An old rusted sign attached to a structure read, Government Facility. Trespassers will be terminated. When the helicopter touched down, several men in white snow gear jogged out of the shack and quickly opened Piper's door. Piper McLeod? The attendant had to yell over the roar of the engine to be heard. Piper nodded and her teeth began to wildly chatter as the sub-zero temperature jabbed her. I'm here to assist you into the facility. The attendant snapped free the many safety restraints and guided Piper from her seat. When her feet sank into 2 feet of snow, Piper instinctively winced. Dang! The temperature was so far below zero that the thermometer had hit its bottom mark and stayed there months before. Inhaling actually hurt Piper's lungs and instantly froze her nostrils. She'd known hard winters, but this cold was like nothing she'd ever felt. It was the type of cold that prevented you from thinking straight. Right this way? The attendant hurried Piper toward the shack. At that moment, any place that provided shelter from the cold became a splendid idea. Piper dashed toward it, thankful when another waiting attendant opened the door to speed her entry. Heedlessly thrusting herself inside, Piper entered an entirely new and unexpected world. Underneath the shack's apparently flimsy exterior was a smartly outfitted lobby with thick white marble tiles and clean steel walls. A chandelier of glass and steel hung from the ceiling, and at the far side, an elevator door took up an entire wall. The clash between expectation and reality froze Piper to the spot. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit. A moment later, Dr. Hellion swept inside and approached a panel next to the elevator. She touched it a certain way and it snapped open, exposing a very complex computer. There were flashing lights and buttons and all sorts of things that Piper couldn't even begin to imagine the use of. Dr. Hellion, of course, knew exactly what to do with them and expertly maneuvered through a battery of security protocols that included a voice confirmation, fingerprint identification, and retinal scan. Retinal scan means like they look at your eyeball, they do like lasers and make sure it's you with your eyeball. Your safety and well-being is of paramount importance to us, Piper, Dr. Hellion explained, seeing Piper's bewildered expression. We don't take any chances and so we've created a security system that'll ensure that you remain safe while you are in our care. A moment later, the computer beeped loudly and the doors to the elevator snapped smartly open. Dr. Hellion graciously stepped aside and allowed Piper first entry. Piper had never been on an elevator, especially not one as sleek as this. Gingerly stepping aboard, she saw that the entire back wall was comprised of thick glass and the whole ceiling glowed with light. Ready? Piper nodded, scared and excited at the same time. This really was an adventure. Elevator commence. The elevator instantly responded to Dr. Hellion's command. The door swished shut, and they dropped downward as the elevator fell at an alarming rate. Unexpectedly, a voice filled the elevator. Approaching level 1. Single-celled organisms. Minimum security clearance. The voice was female and without expression. Piper looked around for it. That's the computer voice, Dr. Hellion explained. You can speak to her just like a normal person and she'll respond. Golly! Piper looked up as though expecting to see the computer above her. Go ahead and try. Computer, do cows have feelings? The computer did not respond. Several strange, blipping sounds came from the overhead speakers. That's a great question, Piper, but the computer can only help you with questions that are more specific, Dr. Hellion coached gently. Piper thought about it for a moment before trying again. Computer, does my black and white cow got feelings? Yet again, Piper had flummoxed the computer and the blipping sounds increased. Dr. Hellion politely coughed. Try asking the computer our current location, Piper. Where am I now? This elevator is approaching level 1 in 3, 2, 1 second. On cue, the elevator emerged out of the darkness and descended into an incredible underground world. Turning around so that she faced the glass wall behind her, Piper's eyes snapped wide and then impossibly wider still, and yet somehow could not take in all the mind-boggling sights that lay before her. Making a connection. This is reminding me of the glass elevator in Willy Wonka. Wonder if anybody else is getting that same connection. Elevator pause, Dr. Hellion commanded, and they immediately came to a stop. The elevator hung directly in the center of a cavernous man-made well. The facility was approximately the size of a mini Grand Canyon, but instead of rock, it was all steel, and glass curved in a big, sweeping circle around the elevator, which dangled in the middle. In an unprecedented feat of engineering, bridges extended from the curved sides to connect with the elevator, yet appeared to be supported by nothing and were nonetheless completely stable. Everything was shiny and white, an illuminating blue glowing light. Huge glass walls made it possible to see exactly what was going on inside each floor from the elevator, while at the same time allowing the inhabitants to look down over a central atrium, which was at the very bottom of the well. Holy cow, Piper squealed and reached for something to steady herself. As I live and breathe, I swear I couldn't imagine up a place like this, even if I tried all my days and nights. Look how them walls is all covered. Like we're in the center of a glass circle. It's so shiny. It hurts my eyes to look at it. The lights of the facility were reflecting off of the glass of the elevator onto Dr. Hellion's face, and her excitement for the place was palpable. Indeed, Dr. Hellion suddenly seemed to be a girl herself, and looked at the facility as though she were seeing it for the first time too. I remember when I made my first trip down here, and I knew right away that I'd found not just a home, but a whole world that were special. It's so clean and bright, and everything makes sense here. Dr. Hellion pulled her eyes away and smiled at Piper. Every time I leave, I can't wait to return. Doesn't it take your breath away? It sure does, Piper agreed. There are many extraordinary things here, Piper, Dr. Hellion smiled. That's why you'll feel right at home. Starting on level 1, we have single-celled organisms, and as we descend, you'll notice that each level has more and more complex life forms. On level 2, we have horticulture specimens and plant life. Level 3, insects. Level 5, marine life. Level 7 is the aviary, and so on and so on. Everything you can imagine, we have it. Unparalleled facilities, cutting-edge technology, and the best minds in the world all under one roof. Dr. Hellion placed her hand on Piper's shoulder. I hope that you'll be as happy here as I am, Piper. Sighing as though she wished they could stay looking down at the facility forever, Dr. Hellion finally tore her eyes from the glass. Watch carefully. There's so much more to see. Elevator commence. And that's where I'm going to pause today.